Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all having a great day. And I figured with the draft being over with and most teams are now trying to figure out who will be on the roster come training camp, I figured it's a good time to do way too early season predictions, how I think the standings will look. So with no further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with the AFC East. Um, who, which I think is a pretty easy division to figure out because you got two top teams and then two teams at the bottom. So I think first place, I'm going to say the Bills return to being in first place. Yeah, I think this past year, they had a lot of injuries on this team, and I think, having a tougher schedule and just, yeah, it just like the Patriots having an easier schedule, I think helped New England be able to get a lot of wins and win this division. But I think with the Patriots losing some pieces and the Bills, get bringing in some good players like DJ Moore, and a pretty good draft, I would say. So I think they reclaim the top spot, but I do think New England will get second place. I think it'll be between these two teams. Who wins the division? Sorry to the Jets and Dolphins fans, but I just don't see really any way they're competing unless like Josh Allen or Drake May gets injured and then or they both get injured and then those teams are able to compete in this division. I do think the Jets finish in third. I think the way they've constructed this roster with veterans, along with bringing a lot of young talent in the draft, I think they'll be better than they were last year. Like the Jets last year, it was just a tumultuous year. Like they didn't really have any QB play. The defense was atrocious, and especially after they traded their top two defenders. But I think bringing in a lot of talent, having Geno Smith, a veteran quarterback, to start the year, who I think will play better than he did with the Raiders. I think the Jets could finish in like that 6, 7, 8 win range, where it's like they could be very competitive, and then having three first round picks, they don't need to suck like maybe other teams to get their quarterback because they could trade up and land that QB and really be able to hopefully find the franchise quarterback that they haven't had since Joe Namath. And then finally, I think the Dolphins finish in last place. Um, I mean, this is a tear it down rebuild. Like they've traded everybody outside of like Devon Achane. Like they traded or released most of the older guys on this roster. Even Jalen Waddle, a younger guy, they moved on from. They did bring in some talent, but I think yeah, I think this is a team that is not going to be good. Hopefully, Malik Willis can at least show something to where the Dolphins at least could potentially be competitive in this division. But I just don't think, as of now, the Dolphins are really going to be that great this year. I think this is a year where they just suck, and then hopefully get a top pick next year and are able to hopefully build this team through the draft and really invest into the right positions to where they can hopefully finally be in a contending window for not just a couple years, but for a while. Moving on to the AFC North, where I think the Ravens get back on top. Like some people might, say, well, what the Ravens lost so many players in free agency, and they have a new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. Is it going to mesh all? But I think it will. Like I think Jesse Minter will have this defense playing elite. Like I could kind of see it kind of being like Mike McDonald's first year a couple years ago, where it's like early on the defense struggled, but then as the season went along, the team started to get better on the defensive side. I think they made great moves bringing in Trey Hendrickson. The draft was great, and I think the Ravens, who are the best team in this division, like there's no question they're not the best team in this division. I think the Ravens right now, as it sits, win this division. But I think it becomes interesting who finishes second, third, and fourth because I think all three of the Bengals, Browns, and Steelers all made really good moves to have their team being better. But I'm gonna have the Bengals finish in second. It's more so due to the Aaron Rodgers question mark, and the Steelers have kind of gone all in, thinking they're going to be competitive, and you know even if Rodgers is there, we saw the ceiling of that team even with a better offense. Like we saw the ceiling of that team. And I think the Bengals with a healthy Burrow, with a hopefully improved defense with Dexter Lawrence, Boye Mafe, Brian Cook, even the additions with Cassius Howard made in the draft, I think the Bengals will be much more competitive. The offensive line was really good this past year. So if Burrow's able to stay up, if the defense takes a step to being like top 20 ish, I think this team could very much be in the playoff conversation for the first time in a couple of years and hopefully make some real damage to keep Burrow in the Cincinnati or in the state that he's from. Third place, I'm gonna go with Steelers. And I think all three of these teams could be interchangeable. I just think with the Aaron Rodgers question marks, you don't know whether he's going to be, on the team or not. If he's not, I'd probably have them around this range just because I don't trust the rest of the quarterbacks. Yes, the talent around the quarterbacks um is pretty good and we'll have this team we'll have this offense really good, but they're either gonna start Mason Rudolph, Will Howard, or Drew Aller if Rodgers isn't there, and I just can't trust any of those guys. That defense, I know they made additions to it, but it's still not the greatest defense, and it's the highest paid defense for like a while. So right now, I think the Steelers finish in third, but if Rodgers comes back, they could flirt with second, maybe first place, and then fourth, I got the Browns. But I think this will be a competitive Browns team. Like I don't think we're gonna see this team finish with like less than 4 wins or less than 5 wins, I should say. Like I think this team, no matter who starts at quarterback, like the offense, they brought in entire new offensive line. They invested into the skill positions. They had improvements on the defense. So I do think even with Todd Monken, who we'll see if he works out as the head coach, I think this Browns team will be competitive. They will be in games and really competing in the AFC North. I just don't think now with how the other three teams are constructed, they're going to compete to win this division. Moving on to the AFC South, where I think this is probably a tough division to choose because you have the Jags and Texans and Colts, who all three last year at multiple stretches of time looked like they were going to be serious contenders. You have a Titans team that made a lot of moves to help improve this roster. And I like Robert Saleh. I like Brian Dayball. But right now, I'm going to have the Texans finish in first place. I just trust this team. Like, I know CJ Stroud had another down year, but I think with the improved O line, like they bring in Wyatt Teller, Braden Smith as two veteran offensive linemen. They bring in Keelan Rutledge as another body in case Wyatt Teller or even Ed Ingram get injured. This defense, finally invested into the defensive tackle position with Caden McDonald like bringing Reed Blankenship, like they're gonna have the best defense. And I think Stroud and this offense will have a bounce back season. And I just trust them the most. Like so far, out of all these teams, I just trust Houston the most with D'Amico and Stroud to steady the ship and win this division. Second place is interesting. I think I, I think I'm gonna go to the Colts, which I know is gonna be crazy to say because actually no, I'm gonna say this might be a hot take. I'm saying Tennessee finishes in second place. I can see the vision of this team. Like I think Cam Ward will get better in year two. I think with the additions they made on offense with Wandale Robinson, Cardell Tate, the additions on defense to make this defense better, I think Tennessee can be a team that we see take a leap. And every year it seems like a team picking the top 10, top five. The following season, they make the playoffs. I think Tennessee could be that team where they could surprise a lot of people and, you know, really be competing in this division. And look, the Colts and Jags, I think, are great teams. I think this is a division that it's going to be really competitive. I think all these teams could win it, but it's just with Indy, Daniel Jones is coming off a torn Achilles, and who knows what he's going to look like. Because even before the torn Achilles, Jones' play was starting to go down, and I just don't know if he's going to play as well as he did in the first half. And then the Jags, you lose Devin Lloyd and Travis Etienne. Um, so like they lost key contributors last year, and they really overachieved, winning 13 games and winning this division. Where I think they're going to have a down year. Not going to say they're going to finish in the bottom five, but they're not going to have as much success, especially playing a first place schedule where I think Tennessee could be that team that's in last place that makes the jump to being competitive. Third place, I'm going to put the Jags. I still think they'll have a really good year, and I do think like this offense will still be really good. I think the defense will be talented as ever, but it's just they're gonna play a first place schedule, which especially for teams that have like huge breakout years that then have to play a harder schedule, they usually aren't as good because they're playing better teams, which means they're not getting all those easy wins. Even though the Jags did have some impressive wins this past year, but they also lost plenty of pieces that I think will have this team regress. And then in fourth place, I got the Colts, which, you know, like I'm a fan of the Colts team. I think Shane Steichen is a great head coach. I think Chris Ballard gets a lot more flack than he should because he's a good drafting GM. He just has rarely ever used free agency to help out this team. He likes building through the draft, and most of the time his draft picks have been really good. I just think this Colts team, the unknown thing about Daniel Jones when he's going to come back. I just think, with Jonathan Taylor will be great, but you know, outside of him, it's like you have Alec Pierce who had a breakout year, but was it just a contract year? Josh Downs, since his rookie year, has kind of gone down in production. Tyler Warren, I think, you know, had a great rookie year early on, and then as Jones was struggling and then got injured, it's just there's a lot of concerns for this Indy offense. I think the defense will be great. Like the Colts are like a team where it's like I could see them finishing with like double digit wins and winning this division. I could also see them finishing with like 7 or 8 or 9 wins and finishing third or fourth in this division. Moving on to the AFC West. First place, I'm going to say the Chargers, which might seem like a hot take because, the Chargers, because the Chiefs and Broncos are in this division, but LA, I think right now might be the best team in this division, which is crazy to say, but Herbert's going to be back, and we know, especially in the regular season, he is great. This offense, I think, will be better with Mike McDaniel, and they'll be able to really, as long as they're healthy, be really good up front. And this defense, yes, lost Jesse Minter, and I think will take a step back, is still really talented with a lot of good players where I still think they'll be a top, at least like 15 defense. And I think this team, which the first 2 years, they've been competitive, but they haven't been able to win this division. I think under Harbaugh they could finally do it, especially with the Chiefs, Mahomes injury. What's he gonna look like? And then Denver, Bo Nix recently got a second surgery on that injury he suffered in the AFC Championship game, and I do think the Broncos are going to not be as great in one score games, which I think with those two teams, I think going to at least early on, maybe struggle. I think the Chargers could really separate themselves as long as they're healthy. I think they can win this division. Second place, I'm gonna have the Chiefs, and you can't, um, what's the word? You can't say the Chiefs aren't going to be good because as long as Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback, this team is going to be good. Like even last year, when the team was struggling, Mahomes was like carrying them and keeping them afloat before his injury. And we saw once he got injured that this team was just not very good. I like the additions that they made, but I think whether Mahomes plays early on or not, I think he's going to struggle on when he first comes back, whether it's week 1 or week 4 or 5. And I think the Chiefs offense is going to have to run through Kenneth Walker. And I think the defense is going to have to step up the way it has so Mahomes can be able to get back under his feet and start playing as great as he has been. So I think the Chiefs could struggle early on and then find their footing and get back to the playoffs where we know they will be dangerous. Um, Third place, no, no, they're there. Third place, I got the Broncos. Um, I mean, I think they won 14 games last year, but I do think the way they won a lot of those games won't be that great. Like a lot of times, Denver, came back in games. Like you think about the Eagles game, the Giants game, where it's like that winning isn't going to be sustainable. I do think the offense will be better with Davis Webb calling plays and not Sean Payton because as great of a play caller as Sean Payton is, I do think he was limiting the ceiling. And I think the defense will be great. I just think Denver's not going to be able to win plenty of games the way they won last year, where I think they could come down and have regression, like a lot of teams do, but still be in that playoff mix because they're just so talented. And then last place, I got the Raiders. I know they made a lot of additions, and I think those will help this team out, but I just don't think they're ready to compete. Like whether Fernando starts week 1 or later on in the season, I just think this team will, be much better than they have been the last couple of years, but they're not going to be contending with these top 3 teams in the division. Moving on to the NFC East, where in first place, I'm gonna say I'm gonna say the Cowboys won this division, which I know people are gonna be like, "What?" But they bring in Christian Parker from the Eagles, who a lot of people said was going to be Vic Fangio's successor once he retired, and they bring in a lot of guys on this defense: Jalen Thompson, Rashawn Gary, Caleb Downs, Malachi Lawrence. Um, really just investing into this defense. They were able to tag Pickens and keep him around for at least this year. So that offense will be um great. And I think if this defense is like much better than it was last year, which I think it will, like Quentin Williams, full year with Dallas, the additions they made in the secondary on the defensive line, I think will help this Cowboys team out where in an NFC East where it's a division where all four teams have plenty of question marks where you're like, could this team be good or will they be bad? I think Dallas, which we've seen in past years, be able to win the division. You think about 2023, where like everybody thought Philly was going to repeat, they didn't. Um, I think Dallas could return as NFC East champs. Second place, I'm gonna go the Commanders, which might seem like a hot take, but like I know Jaden Daniels was banged up this past year, and people are gonna say he's injury prone, and that Washington is gonna have RG3 2.0, but I think he'll be back and healthy. With this defense, the additions they made on defense, I think will definitely help this team out where they're gonna be much better as a unit. And Daniels fully healthy, we saw in 2024, it makes up for a lot of the mistakes. So as long as he's healthy, as long as Terry McLaurin is doing his stuff, Washington will be a team to watch. And I think in an NFC East where there's a lot of question marks with the Eagles, with the Cowboys, with the Giants, even with Washington, we could see some of those teams maybe slip in the standings because those question marks end up turning out to have, you know, being answered, but they end up being, a bad answer. Third place, I'm gonna go with the Eagles. I don't want to push them that far down to being in fourth place, going from first to worst, but they really only won this division because the rest of the teams were just either injured or just bad on one side of the ball to where really kind of locked in. They made plenty of, or they didn't make plenty, but they made some additions. Bringing in, I think it was Sean Mannion to be their offensive coordinator from Green Bay, who's going to run his own scheme, not Nick Sirianni scheme. So I do think that'll be interesting. They are more than likely going to trade AJ Brown, meaning the Eagles. Um, meaning the Eagles are going to enter the year with Devontae Smith and Mekhi Lemon as their top two guys, which I don't hate, but they lost a lot of guys on defense, which I still think will be really good. But they lost Christian Parker, who, like I mentioned earlier, was reportedly Vic Fangio's successor. So how's that going to affect the defense? They lose Jeff Stoutland, the O-line coach who's been there for several decades to help this offensive line be great. If the injury bug comes on this offensive line, you know, they might have to turn for the worse. And Jalen Hurts did not play well this past year. And, if his play goes up to where we know it is, Philly, I think, could easily finish in first place and win it for a third consecutive year, but it could also be worse. And we're sitting here next year with Jalen Hurts not being an Eagle and the Eagles having a new franchise quarterback. And then finally, I got the Giants finishing in last place. I know they made a lot of additions, and John Harbaugh will have this team playing better. It's a really competitive division. Like, this is one of the more competitive divisions entering 2026, where I do think the Giants will improve from the last couple of years where they've been, just an easy team to beat. I think they will be competitive. They will be much better. It's just how much better are they going to be? Like, will they be able to compete and win this division? It's possible, but right now I don't see it. But out in the NFC North, where I'm going to say the Lions win the division. You know, a lot of people thought last year, including myself, Detroit was going to win it. The injury bug hurt them, and Ben Johnson clearly was bigger effect on this offense than people gave him credit for. But I do think, they bring in Blake Miller, so Penei Sewell will go over to the left side, so that tackle will hopefully be better. Hopefully the interior offensive line is healthier and better. The defense has had plenty of injuries the last couple of years, which has also been a reason they've kind of been derailed in seasons. Yeah, they have Jared Goff, they have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, Aiden Hutchinson. They have a lot of talent, so they're going to be competitive. But if the injury bug doesn't bite them this year, I think they could definitely make it back to NFC North contention and possibly finally making it to their first Super Bowl. Second place, I'm gonna go with the Bears. I think they've had a tremendous offseason, um, helping out this defense. I was surprised Dylan Thieneman made it to 25th, so I think that was a great addition. Bringing in Kobe Bryant and Devin Bush to help out the secondary and the linebacking core was great. And I think this Bears offense loses DJ Moore, but I think will still be a um, great offense under Ben Johnson. And I think the defense, might be better than it was this past year to where the Bears will still be contending in the NFC North. And probably, I would say, the most competitive division, the NFC North, just because every team last year finished with a winning record. And it feels like every team has improved so far. So I think this could be a division where any team could win it and any team could finish in last place. Third place, hmm, this is an interesting one. I'm gonna say, oh, yeah, I'm gonna say the Vikings, which would be Green Bay, would finish in last. It's just Minnesota. I think Kyler Murray will give them better quarterback play, which they've needed. Like we saw with Sam Darnold, even Kirk Cousins in 2022, where when they have good, good, great quarterback play, this team is very much in the contention to win the Super Bowl. And this defense, under Brian Flores, we know is going to be great. So I think if Kyler is able to, play as good as we know he can play, I think this team could definitely win this division or win the division. And then Green Bay, I do think the Packers will be good. It's just, every year it seems like since Jordan Love's first year in 2023, everybody seems to be putting them up in like the Super Bowl contention. Like, oh, this is the year if Green Bay stays healthy. But you lose Jeff Hafley, which was a huge, like he was a huge reason why Green Bay's defense was um great the past couple of years. After they moved on from, I forget who it was the prior in 2023, but you lose him. So I do think the defense is going to have an adjustment period, as most of the time teams do when they bring in new coordinators. There is an adjustment period. I also think Jordan Love has some great moments, has some bad moments. So can he put a full season together? Micah Parsons, who knows, you know, how he'll be entering the year. I just think Green Bay has a lot of question marks to where I'm not confident saying they'll win this division, even though they could. I just right now don't think they will. NFC South. I like another competitive division. I'm gonna say I'm gonna say the Panthers win the division again because I've liked their offseason. Like Devin Lloyd and Jalen Phillips were great additions to this defense, which already got better from 24 to 25. They have a healthy Derek Brown. I think I think bringing in offensive line help along with a couple more weapons for Bryce Young will help this offense be more consistent. And in an NFC South where all four teams, like the NFC North, could win it, Carolina, I feel like coming off, winning the division, and yeah, and nearly beating the Rams in that wild card round, I do think that the Panthers could improve from last year and have a winning record and really beat the top team in this division. Second place, I'm gonna have the Bucks. Actually, I'm gonna have the Saints. I have New Orleans. I've liked their offseason so far. I mean, they've helped out Tyler Shuck a lot with Travis Etienne, David Edwards, Jordan Tyson in the first round, even Oscar Delp on day two to really help him out. Make sure Shuck can be a good team or make sure Shuck can have a great year. I know the defense, isn't the greatest and they definitely need to improve that unit. But I also think this offense can be really like top 15, top 10 probably this year, where if the defense is just like middle of the pack, New Orleans really could contend in this division. And I think, Tampa Bay and Atlanta, who, some people might say the Bucks are the best team. I didn't like them bringing in Zach Robinson, who did a horrible job in Atlanta in 24 and 25. I didn't like that OC hire. I still don't understand why they kept Todd Bowles to where I think the Bucks, you know, yes, the injury bug was a primary reason, but the coaching was also a big reason to where I think Tampa could finish possibly in last. I am going to have them finish in third because this team is still really talented. Like Baker, Chris Godwin, and Beckham Buka. They did lose Mike Evans, but still, they have a great offense. The defense had reinforcements with William Bain, Josiah Trotter, even Keontae Scott in the draft, along with Alex Anzalone in free agency, to where this defense will be really good. I just don't trust Todd Bowles as a head coach to have this team be really good. And then Atlanta, it's the QB concerns. Like the rest of this roster, barring James Pierce completing his um like not going to jail. Barring that, this team is like mostly set. Like the offensive line is great. The skill position players are great. The defense has finally, become a great unit. They just need good QB play. And while I'm not the biggest Tua or Petix fan, I think they could be solid guys to where this team, if they're good enough, could compete for the South. I just don't believe that either will. And I think this time next year, Atlanta could be drafting another quarterback in the first round that hopefully will find their Matt Ryan, hopefully be their Matt Ryan replacement. And then finally, the NFC West. First place, I'm going to go with the Rams. Yeah, I know the Ty Simpson pick. Most people are going to say, well, why did the Rams bring in somebody to help out this team now? But I think this team is loaded. It doesn't really need much help. Like they were a game away from making it to the Super Bowl. So we know that, this team, what the way it's constructed is better than last year's team because they improved the corner room. And I think with Seattle losing a lot of guys in free agency, had a good draft, but when you lose a lot of contributors in free agency, especially your star running back, I think Seattle will regress. And then the Niners, I mean, their offseason has been very interesting. So I think the Rams, as of now, clearly, in my opinion, are first place. But I'd have Seattle in second place. I do think this team still will be really good. And I think even with the losses they had in free agency, they still brought back some guys. They still had a good enough draft to where, I think this team can be back to making the playoffs. They're not going to win 14 games and be as good as they were this past year, but they still will be really competitive in a division where outside of the Cardinals, the other three teams are very, very competitive. But they're third place. I got the Niners, which means I got the Cardinals in fourth place. I just, the draft I thought was very interesting. Like they drafted, some interesting guys at earlier picks than I thought. I like the Mike Evans addition. Bring another weapon. They finally were able to extend Trent Williams, so I'm glad he's going to be back. But it's just this team continues to get the injury bug, and I just don't have faith that this team will be able to beat the Rams and Seahawks. Like even this past year, when they played both of those teams, like they beat both of those teams, but they beat the Rams on a Thursday night game with Mac Jones when the Rams decided to go for it on a fourth down when they could have just kicked a field goal and possibly gotten the ball back. And then they beat Seattle in week one when the team was still trying to figure out stuff. So I don't think the Niners are really close to either of those teams, especially with the additions LA made this offseason, to where I do think they're like a tier below them in the NFC West, which is why I think they'll finish third. And then Arizona, this is just a tank year, in my opinion. Like this team is not going to be very good, which is why I don't know why they drafted Jeremiah Love, but that's for another day. But this team was either going to start Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew, or Carson Beck. None of those guys really inspire anything. This defense lost plenty of pieces, and I don't know if it's going to be any good at all outside of like maybe Walter Nolan and maybe Josh Sweat if he's on the team. So I do think that Arizona just is not going to have a great year, but maybe that ends up working out. Maybe they get the top pick and are able to take Arch or Dante Moore or whoever the top QB is, and in 2027 with Mike LaFleur, maybe this team can finally be able to be competitive in an NFC West that for years has been a division where it felt like all four teams are really good and all four teams could win the division. But that'll do it for today's video. Hope you guys like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. And until then, hope you have a great day and bye.